So our featured speaker tonight is Major General Robert Bodisch. He has served in the Texas State Guard for the past 30 years. He currently serves as the Commanding General of the Texas State Guard. Throughout his career, he has served in several command and staff positions, including 2 years in Iraq with the U.S. Department of Justice International Criminal Investigative Training Assistance Program. There's a lot of big words in General Bodisch's bio. In addition to his military career, General Bodisch has a long list of law enforcement credits, including Deputy Sheriff with Harris County, Investigator with Harris County DA Office, and Chief Investigator with Texas Prosecutor Council, and Senior Criminal Investigator with Texas Attorney General's Office. In 2009, he was appointed Department of Public Safety Chief of Staff and Assistant Director of Texas Homeland Security. General Bodisch retired from law enforcement in 2018 and was commissioned as a Special Texas Ranger by the Director of Department of Public Safety. The General is married to Sharice Canfield, and they have 4 sons. General Bodisch also holds a recent clearance with the U.S. Department of a secret clearance with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So I assume that means he can tell us things, but then he'd have to shoot us, so. No shooting tonight, but please welcome General Robert Bodisch.
Howdy. Howdy. You think I was from A&M, right? I go to so many things, and there's always Aggies there, and they're always saying howdy, and everybody says howdy back, and whoop whoop, and all that, so I just figured I have to do it too. Well, thanks for having me here this evening, and it's a great honor and privilege to be up here with you. I like to do something whenever I talk to a group, and that is ask all the veterans to please stand.
Oh. Wow.
All the veterans. Thank you for your service. America is what it is today because of you, and we appreciate you. I'd also like to recognize 3 members of the Texas State Guard that are here tonight. Judge Chuck Vanover. He also doubles as my lawyer, so if I say anything bad, he'll try to fix it for me. I also have Judge Don Cosby. And also Brigadier General Robert Hastings, who is our Army Component Commander for the Texas State Guard. And Julie, I certainly appreciate the fact that I think we communicated, what, 6 or 7 months ago, and finally got to this date here. Julie told me I could speak about 3 hours, so but when she told me that, I thought, well, you know, I remember Socrates, you know, he was that great Greek philosopher, and he gave very, very long speeches, and the Greeks killed him. So I'm going to try to stay on target and stay on track here. Make sure I can operate this machine. So I want to talk about 2 things. One is the Texas State Guard, and I would tell you probably the best kept secret in Texas is the Texas State Guard. A year ago, how many people in here knew anything about the Texas State Guard a year ago? No. A few of us. Wow. Man, hey, that's pretty good. Y'all are smart. So, I don't see that in a lot of groups that I've talked to. They say, what? Is that the National Guard? Is that the Army? No. The Texas State Guard is a state defense force and a state military force. And as you can see here, we're authorized under federal statute and also Chapter 437 of the Texas Government Code. Title 32 says a state may provide by its laws, organize and maintain defense forces. And so back in 1941, the great state of Texas decided they wanted to have a state defense force, and that's when they organized the Texas State Guard. And as you can see here, the Texas Military Forces means the Texas National Guard, the Army National Guard, the Texas Air National Guard, and then the third component is the Texas State Guard.
Wow.
Here's our mission statement. We provide highly trained, mission-ready state military forces to assist state and local authorities in times of emergencies, for homeland security and service through defense support to civil authorities. So basically, the bottom line is we're in a life-saving business. And business has been pretty good over the past years back to 1941. And we'll talk about a couple of those significant events. But we're Texans helping Texans. So the State Guard is, the Texas State Guard is recognized as the premier state defense force in the country, and we're also the largest. We have an authorized strength of 2,300, and back in the later part of 2018, the governor directed me to expand the force to 5,000. So that's a big jump from 2,300, right? You guys are recruiting all the time, and I'm recruiting. We're all recruiting probably the same people. Law enforcement recruiting, the regular military is recruiting. But you know, there's only about 29% of the population of the United States that is even qualified for military service. That's how sad our situation is with our younger folks today. So the reason why the governor wants us to go to 5,000 is we need long-term sustainability. Everybody in the Army National Guard, the Air National Guard, and the Texas State Guard all have jobs during the week. So when an event happens, a hurricane or a flood, and we call people to state active duty, we're taking them away from their families, we're taking them away from their jobs. And you know, most of the times those events are going to be between 3 and maybe 10 days at the most. Well, Hurricane Harvey was like 30 days. So that really does stretch. And you have employers hollering and, I need my employee back, and, all those kinds of issues. So in order to be able to sustain ourselves in a long-term event, we need to expand the force. So here are the eligibility requirements. So you have to be a citizen or a lawful permanent resident. You have to have lived in Texas at least 180 days so you can get the y'all down and some other things so we can understand you if you come from out of state. Age 18 to 70, good health and meet height weight requirements, pass a criminal background check. Prior military service is not required, but if you have prior military service, an honorable discharge is required. Must not be a registered sex offender. And we welcome all military and civilian skill sets. Now, the good thing about the Texas State Guard is there's no overseas deployments. Everything is right here in Texas. And so when you see we see a lot of our active duty military that are getting out because they've been to so many deployments. Plus they don't want to get rid of the uniform and they want to stay in that military camaraderie. We see a lot of them joining back into the Texas State Guard because they know there aren't going to be any overseas deployments. So as I indicated, we were established back in 1941, and at its peak during World War II, there were 17,000 soldiers in the Texas State Guard providing security for critical state infrastructure and strategic warfighting facilities throughout the entire state. Since World War II, we've responded to hundreds of emergency events as hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, ice storms, the space shuttle disaster, and even 2 periods of martial law. How many people knew that we had 2 periods of martial law in Texas? So you learned something here tonight. In 1947, martial law was declared when the French freighter Grand Camp exploded in Texas City, which then ignited the Monsanto chemical plant and basically wiped out Texas City. As you can see here, 461 dead, 4,000 injured, and 115 missing, and there was extensive property damage. It was millions back then, but it'd be billions today, in today's money. Also, the State Guard participated in the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster in 2003, where all 7 of the crew were killed when the Columbia broke apart, re-entering the atmosphere. The debris field covered East Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And just in Texas, we recovered over 40,000 pieces of that aircraft.
Wow.
So, now more recent events since 2005. We've had over 115 deployments of state guardsmen, Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, which were long-term events, 8 hurricanes back in 2008, and also Harvey in 2017. We've been involved in border operations, including Operation Border Star from 2007 to present, and Operation Drawbridge from 2017 to present. Operation Drawbridge is the camera program that DPS has all along the border. About 5,000 cameras, and they're little game cameras, camouflaged, put up into the trees and into the, on our side of the border. And what's good about those game cameras, they're real time. So when we're reviewing those hits that come in on those cameras, we can see whether it's a horse or a cow or 25 people and one of them carrying an AK-47. So that program has been very valuable to the state of Texas because Border Patrol still uses the old ground sensors. Well, the problem with the ground sensors is that when something steps on it, you don't know whether it's a cow, whether it's a horse, or whether it's people. So they were always dispatching people to go check out those sensors. Well, you wasted a lot of time and effort if it turned out to be a horse or turned out to be a deer or something like that. So the border camera program has been very, very successful, and I think that program will continue for some time. We were also involved in the Bastrop fires. Operation Lone Star is where we have a very large exercise of our medical personnel that goes down to the Rio Grande Valley and provides medical services free of charge. And what that does, it exercises our medical people so that when we have a catastrophic event, they're all prepared and they're used to working out of a tent or out of a location that may not be the best location, but it's good enough to take care of people that are injured or have some kinds of medical problems. We're also involved in search and rescue and border recovery missions. And we're also involved in an oral rabies vaccination program where we link up with the state health services. They have the aircraft and they have these machines that throw these baits out, and we provide the military forces to operate those machines and get those baits out to try to keep the rabies situation under control along the border. So we've been involved in a lot of things since 2005. In Hurricane Harvey, we deployed over 1,000 people, and for over 13,000 man days. That means most of those people were on at least 13 days. A lot of them were on a lot more than that. We had some that we probably had on state active duty for almost 6 months out of Hurricane Harvey. And when we're called to state active duty, we are paid. So that's a plus. As you can see here, the missions that we handled in Hurricane Harvey was the mega shelters that were set up for tens of thousands of people that were getting out of harm's way. We also run the Evacuation Tracking network. So when people get taken out of a nursing home or a hospital or some kind of facility, the way we track it, we put a band on them. And then we've got computers that scan those bands, and then we can tell where people are at any given time, as well as their pets, and a lot of times, a couple of bags of luggage that go with them. When I was in Iraq in 2005, my dad was in a military retirement home in Biloxi, Mississippi, during Katrina. And we lost him for about 4.5 weeks before we finally tracked him down. So having this evacuation tracking network here in the state of Texas is really a good thing, and it's a program that the State Guard runs entirely. We're involved in many of the boat rescues, and as you can see here, we rescued over 1,300 people. We ran the regional staging areas, the military district coordinators, where we would link up with local law enforcement so that they would have a military person that could assist them in getting personnel and equipment to their locations. And we also had people that were in the State Operations Center at DPO's headquarters in Austin. So this is how we're organized. The governor serves as the commander-in-chief, and then he appoints an adjutant general. The adjutant general is in charge of the Army National Guard, the Air National Guard, and the Texas State Guard. But each one of those three components has a commander over those different components. But the adjutant general is the general over all three. This is how we are task organized. We have an Army component, an Air Division, a medical brigade, and also a maritime component. So no matter what your background is or what skills you have, we're recruiting. So if everybody would raise your right hand and repeat after me. No, but we are recruiting. So how we're different from the National Guard, we're under the command of the governor, and always under the command of the governor. So if they mobilize the National Guard into federal service, then they belong to the president. But the State Guard will always be under the command of the governor. We're an authorized defense force under Title 32 of the Government U.S. Code and Chapter 437 of the Government Code, as I indicated. We're a uniformed state military force, and we provide emergency response and support to civil authorities. And we can rapidly deploy within 2 to 6 hours of any call-up or any deployment. Right, Robert? That's how I usually call the first guy I call and say, hey, I need 10 guys and I need them right now. And he's always there to make sure that happens. So our authorized strength is 2,300 today. Our current strength is about 1,940. That fluctuates a couple of hundred either way, you know, but we're making a very, very strong push now to recruit to get up to our 2,300, so that if we get approved for the 5,000 and we get the legislative budget for it, then we'll be ready to hit the ground running and really get aggressive on our recruiting efforts. This is just to give you an indication where our Army component, our major units are scattered out throughout the state. Our air components, our maritime regiments are mainly close to water, as you can imagine. And our medical brigade is, of course, statewide coverage. Whenever we do get called, it always originates from a local government. So the county judge, who is the Homeland Security coordinator, or the disaster coordinator for your area, and a disaster happens in your county, the county judge contacts the governor and says, I need help, we're beyond our resources here. And then the governor will direct the Division of Emergency Management to provide whatever assistance and personnel needed to address that disaster. These are the current missions that we're engaged in, so ground search and rescue and recovery. One of the interesting things that we've done here recently for about the last 3 or 4 years, in Brooks County, you know, you have the Falfurrias checkpoint. Anybody been through that? Falfurrias checkpoint, a few people. So it's 60 miles up from the border. So when you have the coyotes bringing up people that are here without papers or illegally, what they'll do is they'll stop short of the checkpoint. And they'll tell them, okay, now get out here and go about 5 miles into this ranch that way, and then turn left and go that way, and then turn left again and go that way, and we'll pick you back up on the other side of the checkpoint. Well, you think that really happens? They've got their money, and they leave those folks out there, you know, So what happens is they get out on these very, very large ranches, hundreds of thousands of acres. They have no water, no food, no telephone. They get disoriented, they get lost, they succumb to the elements, and then of course all the animals out there do what they do. And so for several years we've been going out with teams and doing grid searches and recovering a lot of the remains that are out there just on the ground, and sending them up here to North Texas to the DNA center up here. And what they do is then do the DNA, and then they try to match it back to databases and to repatriate those bones and at least let the families know that their loved one is no longer with them. So we've been involved in that for a while. We've got 54 engineers that do a lot of engineering stuff, especially water and wastewater. And you can imagine during a flood or a hurricane, you always have problems with water and wastewater and all that kind of problem. And so we've got some guys that are really high speed, and they will go out and work with the cities or the counties to try to get their systems operational again, or at least advise them as to what the problem is and how they can fix it quickly. We also are involved in that, as I said, the Emergency Evacuation Tracking Network. We are involved in emergency shelter operations, points of distribution. So whenever you have a big catastrophic event and you start getting tons and tons of bottled water and MREs and all that kind of stuff, somebody's got to organize it, and somebody's got to be able to distribute it out to the people that need it the most. And so we also handle those situations. We're also involved in emergency communication support, where we have what we call TICP trailers that will link in and provide a bridging link for communications in the area where the communications are down. As you can see here, we do a lot of other things, aeromedical staging and reception teams in order to move people by aircraft. So that's a very highly skilled task that we are involved in. We also work as district military coordinators, warehousing, and other specialized law enforcement missions that support law enforcement mostly on the border and at DPS headquarters in Austin. So lots of missions, lots of operations that we're involved in. And so as I said, we're recruiting. So 18 to 70, I think that's probably about 70% of this room in here. So we did leave some brochures at the front if you're interested. And even if you're not interested, but you know someone who might be, someone who's just recently got out of the military, or someone who's got prior military experience. But as I said, you don't need military experience. We will teach you everything you need to know. And we are really trying very hard to get in some young folks. We think it would be beneficial for them. So if you got grandkids or even kids that are graduating from high school, we'd sure like to talk to them. They'll learn some very, very valuable skill sets for sure. And they'll have some tremendous Texans that can be role models and work with them and teach them a lot of leadership skills. So as I said, we're Texans serving Texans, and we're proud to do it. And that part of it, if you have some questions, I'm glad to entertain some questions about the Texas State Guard, and then we'll talk a little bit about another topic here. Yes, sir.
Why can't you be deployed, like on the border, have Texas State Guard on the border, armed, and prepared to repel the invasion that's going on down there?
Well,
4,000 people.
yeah, it's a big problem right now, as everybody in this room knows. With the smaller forces we've got, I mean, somebody has to be prepared. Matter of fact, we deployed people on May 1st, and then we deployed people again on May the 7th for the floods and stuff. Somebody has to be prepared and ready to go at all times to respond to these kinds of disasters. So,
if you and Governor Abbott were to have a joint press conference, were you going to announce that we're going to have the Texas State Guard armed and repel the invaders? You would have a massive
mass response to that. I think you definitely make your recruiting goals.
All right, once again, y'all raise your right hand. No, but it's, let me, in the next section here, where I talk about the border a little bit, let me kind of defer to that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Yes, ma'am.
Do you get to have the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you get to have the military benefits, like going to the PX and base and stuff like that?
We do have a state PX at Camp Mabry at Austin at the headquarters.
But it's not the same as going to the military site? Are y'all considered military?
Yes, we're a state military force.
Okay, so
So we have access to the PX, but we don't have a commissary on Camp Mabry.
Okay, so if y'all did go down to the border and fight, do y'all have the equipment to protect yourselves?
Right, and so for many, many years, we have been an unarmed force, and we've been prepared to handle all the disasters that Texas has. And we have them all the time. There's always something going on. Either it's a wildfire in West Texas, or an ice storm, or a flood, or a hurricane, or a tornado, or the wildfires in Bastrop. There's always something going on that we're deploying our folks to. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, when you said only 29% of the population is qualified, I'm curious, what do you attribute that to?
Democrats dumbing down our kids. Schools.
Video games?
Doing this all day long.
What? They're not on the couch.
They got strong thumbs,
But they can't.
but they're medically and physically not qualified. So that's pretty sad. And that's a recent study that's come out with that statistic. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a boot camp, or how do you
Yes,
train
ma'am.
the ones that?
Those that don't have prior military service, we have a basic orientation program that we put them through. And we have all the same things that normal military service does. We have NCO academies, we have command and general staff, college courses and all that, all the same stuff. And a lot of it is done in conjunction with our National Guard partners. So they put the courses on, we take a lot of those, and then other courses that they don't have for us, and we put them on ourselves. But we got some very, very talented people in the organization. Yes?
Yes, a lot of this is new information for me. You said that the Texas State Guard is not typically armed. On the mission statement, it said that they're to provide mission-ready military forces. This is an unarmed military we have?
Well, let me be clear. If the governor says, I want you to do this mission and it'll be armed, then that's the way it is.
Train for it.
So we have, it's just like anything in the military. If somebody says, well, you're going to be a truck driver tomorrow, well, you go train for it and then you go do the mission. So, yes, ma'am.
Do all states have a state guard?
25 states have state defense forces.
Does Florida?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think theirs went by the boards.
Because they're, the Pensacola area, the Panama City area is still a mess after
Mhm.
the hurricane in October. And things aren't getting done, and
We have seen a resurgence in the states that don't have state guards, because I know I've been contacted by 2 or 3 different states just in the past year, wanting to know, what do we do and how do we get all this going? And, we kind of walk them through the process and what they need to do legislatively and all that. Yes, ma'am.
Is the day-to-day life of a member of the state guard similar to that as a military reservist, train 1 weekend a month and then?
Yes, ma'am. 1 weekend a month and then 4 days in the summer for annual training, where basically our annual training is testing them on all the skills that they're learning during the year.
When you, where are you recruiting? I know you're recruiting just, I'm right here. Because my son's friend joined the Marines, but I know they don't know about the Texas State Guard in the schools.
No, I know.
And it's imperative that they do, because you got some homegrown Texans that would think it'd be an honor to serve there.
Well,
I mean,
if we
recruiting
can,
here is great, but you need to be out there with those young pups.
yeah, well, like I said, we're looking for younger folks, because look at me and Rob, we're, you know, one crutch away. But no, we're looking for the young folks, and the high schools is a great place. Now, if we get our budget that we're asking for, we're going to hire 3 full-time recruiters and put them in the large metropolitan areas. And that's all they'll do all day long is recruit.
On that situation with the coyotes, you're leaving them and then they're getting disoriented and dying, what, is there a percentage on that, a monthly, or how many are actually dying?
Well, there's really no telling, because some of these ranches are hundreds of thousands of acres, and you just don't know which way people go, especially when they, you know, are disoriented. And you don't know whether they're going that way, and you know what we try to do is to work these grid searches and you know, clear an area, at least that we know there's nothing else there to find in an area, and then we move to another area. But I mean, a 100,000 acre ranch, you know, you do the best you can.
I have a question real quick. So you said you're at 20, your goal is 2,300, but
Well, that's
then
all
you're
authorized
expecting to get to 5,000. Is that supposed to happen during this legislative session, and is there any reason to think it won't?
Let me qualify this. So I have asked for $11.8 million so that we can hire the full-time staff in order to have full-time recruiters in the large metropolitan areas. Right now, the House has given us 5.8 of that request, and we're still waiting to hear what the Senate is going to do. So the Senate could, you know, give us all, and then it's all going to get worked out in conference, or they could give us none. So if we only get half the money, then I'm only going to get the force to 3650, because that'll be half of the, you know, the difference to get to 5,000. If we get none of the money, then we're going to stay at 2,300, because that's all, you know, you can only operate with the money you have, and that's right now, that's all we can operate with.
And is 2,300, like, to me that doesn't seem like very much for a state this size. So are you like always hurting for more?
Yes, ma'am. Always recruiting.
The Cajun Navy gets a lot of publicity when they have the hurricanes, the volunteer deal, with the emergency that we have at the border. In Texas, probably got 100,000 rednecks out there with ATVs and cell phones. Why don't they use them on the border down there? Ask for volunteers. You'd load it up in a hurry.
Oh, I'm sure they would if they asked for volunteers, but you know, there's that, you know, Constitution and rule of law and things like that that we have to be concerned about down there. And, you know.
Just keep an eye on it.
Oh yeah.
Shoot anybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you said that they do get paid. What is the pay, and where are the recruiters located? My son would be interested.
Well, right now there's the recruiter right there sitting right next to you.
He's got business cards. I will be shocked if you don't have at least half a dozen people sign
Well,
up tonight.
I did put some brochures out the front that has all the numbers and the website and all that, so please take one of those if you're interested, or if you think you might be able to identify someone that would be a good candidate for us, so we'd love to talk with you. Yes, sir.
I'm a native Texan. I'm 86 years old. I'm a veteran. I've never heard of the Texas State Guard before tonight.
I told you, we're the best kept secret
know
in
more
Texas.
about it. And how would we recognize a member of the Texas State Guard if we saw him in uniform? What's the difference in the National Guard in appearance? And I'm sure the Texas State Guard is on call readily by the governor,
Yes.
and the National Guard is on call by the president, but at the governor's request. But what's the difference in how that operates in an emergency?
Well, we wear the same uniform as the Army National Guard. The only difference is, instead of U.S. Army, it says Texas State Guard. And we have our own T-patch, our Texas patch, and but it's the same uniform.
You should do football games, you know, like National versus Texas, and then everybody would get excited, and they would realize.
We do a lot of color guard details, but it's funny, we'll have our state guard color guard detail out there on the field, and the announcer will say, "Give a big round of applause to the Texas National Guard." But, you know, they're our brothers and sisters, so we don't worry about it.
Well, y'all need to announce them.
I know we're going to get you.
You mentioned the Constitution. Both the Texas Constitution and the U.S. Constitution give the government the right to repel invasions. Now, this isn't a typical armed invasion that we've seen throughout history. This is a political invasion, and we're getting decimated. And it's a ticking time bomb. This is a 21st century warfare of people who are on a conquest mission. Is this never discussed? We're just curious.
That's good.
Well, it's discussed all the time, but you know, the folks that have the most significant impact on this are folks in Washington, and I don't know. I'm trying not to be political here, okay?
This is a political group. So you have something you want a presentation specifically
Yeah, let's
regarding the border?
let's talk about the border.
Okay.
You know, I know you hear a lot in the press. So I'm taking off my state guard hat now, okay? Now I'm Robert Bodisch, retired DPS, head of Homeland Security. Okay, got it? All right. And I spent a lot of time at the border, trust me, a lot of time. And we hired 500 new troopers, and we put all along the border in the last two legislative sessions. The governor gave us the funds to hire 500 additional troopers, and we've got them down there along with the other 900 plus troopers that we have all along the border. So we got a lot of law enforcement down there, and then of course you got all the local law enforcement. But at the end of the day, it's 1,264 miles.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's a long way.
Yes.
And I can tell you, parts of that river, that Rio Grande River, is no further than here to that back wall. And you can put somebody on the back of a jet ski, and in 15 seconds you can get them from that side to this side. And with 1,264 miles, you just can't cover it all. So how many people in here leave your door wide open at night? Wide open?
Well, unlocked,
Unlocked, okay.
front and back, unlocked.
But not wide open. Don't tell anybody where your house is. Because I hate to see you get robbed. But, and for those people who have been to the border, you know what it looks like. So it's a serpentine, the river is this. It's no straight line. A lot of people, especially those people in Washington, they come down and they would, we would put them on our gunboats down there, and they said, well, I thought this was just a long straight river. And you know, within 2 minutes, they get so turned around on their border, they don't know which side is the U.S. side and which side is the Mexican side because of the way the river snakes so badly.
Wow.
It's that, you know, it's amazing. But there's also lots of areas where you can just simply walk across. The water's not deep enough. So with 1,264 miles, that takes a lot of boots on the ground. It takes technology, a lot of technology. It takes aircraft. It takes boats in the water. It takes patrolling on both sides. But here's the thing. You won't see any patrolling on the other side of the river. You won't see any Mexican boats in the water. And you won't see any Mexican aircraft in the air.
Yeah.
Patrolling.
Yeah.
So we're carrying the load, the heavy load on our side, and trying to cover 1,264 miles of water.
But we still have to do it because we we just talked about budget and how much crews came. What we didn't talk about was the elephant in the room, how many illegal votes were in the election that we scrub up our rolls. That's how they're planning on winning the election, the Democrats, and we know that.
Well, and you know, there's a lot of things going on in Mexico. So this is kind of the drug ways and the best ways. The shortest route from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador to the Texas border is 923 miles, and that goes right to the RGV. If you go to California, it's 2,200 miles. So you see where the pull is, why they want to come to Texas? Because it's only 923 miles. The other way is 2,200 miles. That's a long way. But once the drugs, I don't know if you can see this very well, but once the drugs hit the border, it's dispersed all over the entire United States. So if you have a drug problem in your community, or if you have a gang problem in your community, you have a cartel problem in your community. Because 6 out of the 7 major cartels that operate in Mexico operate in the United States in almost every single state. And just as you're seeing the MS-13 throughout the country using machetes and all this kind of stuff, we're seeing more of that. MS-18 is coming up, MS-13 is coming up. It's a serious issue. It's a serious national security issue because it impacts every single one of us and every single community in the country. So, having spent 2 years in Iraq and seen a lot of things over there that I never wanted to see, I can tell you what we're seeing taking place on the other side of the river is unbelievable. What the depravity, the murders that are taking place. I mean, right now, in the past, I think 8 years, there's been over 200,000 murders because of the drug wars. And why the drug wars? A lot of people don't understand why the drug wars. Well, every single inch of that 1,264 miles belongs to a cartel on their side. And nothing goes through north or south of that plaza, that portion that belongs to the cartel that doesn't get taxed. Nothing. Whether it's people trying to bring over drugs or sex slaves or CDs, or, illegal CDs, or whatever it is, it all gets taxed. Well, real estate means money. So if this cartel feels like they're being constrained and they want to reach out and get a new business platform going, what they're going to do is try to encroach on this cartel over here. And therein lies, that starts the war. And some of the most depraved individuals, because, they're all on cocaine, they're all on drugs, and they're all trying to outdo each other. Acid baths. So they take a 55-gallon drum, they suspend somebody by their feet, and they fill it up with acid, and they slowly lower that person into the acid bath. And what comes back out is just bones. We've seen situations where they'll take a knife and cut all the way around someone's head, and they just peel their skin off their face and then hang it up on a fence pole. And of course, this person ultimately is going to be killed. But beheadings, mass graves, they dig up mass graves all the time with 40, 50, 60, 70 people in these mass graves. Now, you don't hear about a lot of that, do you?
Don't hear about any of it.
And that's because the cartels have killed so many journalists in Mexico. The journalists, what you see on page 1 is a wreck, a minor accident between 2 cars at the corner of Walk and Don't Walk.
Yeah.
And you won't hear anything about 60 people who were butchered and murdered on some ranch, 5 miles away. You won't hear anything about that at all. And, people have been, lots of Journalists have been murdered over there, priests, you name it, government officials. And then, of course, you've got systemic corruption on the Mexican side.
Right.
And, you know, so you're dealing with so many different variables. And then, you know, you don't have any help. So the Congress has a big job ahead of them. And it's the Congress that needs to address the situation. And, you know, when I was the Director of Homeland Security, I'd go down all the time and with these congressmen and from different places, you know, certainly not border states. But they'd come down and, wow, this is really terrible. This is terrible. Well, I just got to go back and do something. And you never hear from them again. So, you know, you're the kind of people, though, that can get their attention because you can make those phone calls and they come to you, to your meetings and things like that. And the Border Patrol is doing a wonderful job, but they are just absolutely overwhelmed. Customs is overwhelmed. Immigration is overwhelmed. All the facilities are completely bursting at the seams. We're on track to get over 1 million people coming in by the end of this fiscal year, over 1 million people. Let me ask you this question. Since 1925, that's when they started keeping statistics on apprehensions, people coming in illegally into the United States and being apprehended. How many people do you think have come in illegally since 1925?
How do you even know?
Millions. More than 11 million.
How much?
More than 11.
How do you even know?
No.
49 million.
Yeah.
49 million.
And they're here.
It's a big number. Now, you know, a lot of them probably got sent back, wherever they came from.
Yeah, right.
But as you can see what's happening today, they're being released into the communities because we don't have the law in place like we do with Mexico. We can turn them back within a few days. But any other country, they have to go through the process, and you don't have the judges.
Get so angry that they act. And do the senators understand Americans are angry about this? Texans are angry about it. Very angry.
I know, I hear it every day. And I don't blame you because it's a terrible situation.
Defend the Second Amendment.
But you have to stay after your elected officials. You have to stay after.
The Republican elected officials.
Yeah, the rhinos have done this to us.
How many miles do we have of wall in Texas right now?
In Texas, it's a few hundred, but clearly not enough.
Well, no.
You know. And you know, you probably don't need a wall all 1,264 miles, but you do need to be able to channel people, and you know, you need technology, you need boats in the water, you need aircraft in the air, you need camera systems, you know, all those things. It's not just one thing.
Well, I can see if wherever we determine to put the wall, those cartels on the Mexican side, you know they're going to be huge wars to get to the open, to get to an area that doesn't have a wall. So they're going to have, you know, their
Yeah, and that's why I say you have to do things strategically,
yeah.
and have a range of options that you can use. What is meant?
Well, I guess my question is, it is constitutional for Texas to build its own wall. Why has this never even happened?
Well, I'm sure we could do whatever, you know, we have money for, but then also you have to remember about 65% of the Texas border is owned by public citizens.
Right.
So, you know, other places like in Arizona and New Mexico, most of theirs is federal land. So they can do whatever they want to there. But a large portion of our 1,200 miles is public citizens.
Right, but they've really suffered tremendously. So why have we never seen anything about that, even thinking about it? Because people say, well, the federal government, we can do it
I
ourselves.
think the president wants to build a wall.
I understand. Now, I understand that. My thing is going back to our governors. Why not?
Well, you know, it's a big bill. It is a very big
Yeah,
bill.
but you bite an elephant one bite at a time.
True.
So if you got to start somewhere,
And
nobody's
those are
ever
good questions
started.
for politicians.
Yeah, I want to make sure that, have you finished your presentation before people keep jumping in with questions? Because that's really not how we conduct our meetings. So finish your presentation, and when you're ready for questions, we'll ask questions.
Well, as I mentioned, you know, you have some very bad guys, cartels operating throughout the country. And so not only do we have a border problem, but we have a countrywide problem. Look at all the opioids. I mean, look at all the deaths from the opioids. And most of those, you know, precursor chemicals are coming out of China. And they come in by the shipload. So the opioid problem is going to be with us for a while. And unfortunately, I guarantee you somebody in this room has either a friend or a relative that has, you know, succumbed to an opioid problem. Yeah. So it's a problem all throughout the United States. As I indicated, you know, they're very ruthless. They have lots of money. It's about a $50 to $60 billion a year industry, the drug cartel business. So you can see that they're not going to give that up very easy, and it's not going to go away for some period of time because there's a lot of money involved. And they can hire the best engineers, the communications engineers, computer gurus, all this kind of stuff. They can hire all that. And even people who tried to do blogging, you know, and report things that are going on in the different cities, their computer experts figure out who they are and where they are, and then they'll send a hit team over there and kill that person. So you won't hear a lot of what's going on over there because they've been silenced, completely been silenced. The media has. Another thing that we see a lot along the border is we'll have a vehicle filled with hundreds of pounds of marijuana or cocaine or whatever they're trying to deliver. And the cartels will tell the drivers, if you lose this load, we know where your parents live, we know where your kids live, we'll kill all of them if you lose this load. So when they're driving and along the, you know, our side of the river, and police get after them, what they're going to do is drive back somewhere, and they're going to dive that vehicle back into the Rio Grande River, right into the river, because everything is packaged where it will float to the top. And as he's driving back, being pursued by the police, he's calling his people on the other side saying, I need a rescue team to, you know, pick me up at such and such a location. There will be boats in the water when he crashes that vehicle into the river, and they start offloading all of that stuff, and they can load that dope back into those inflatable boats within minutes and get it back to the other side so they can try it again later on. So, a lot of problems, but it's going to take a lot of security. It's going to take some laws being changed. It's going to take a lot of technology. It's going to take a lot of people to get this thing under control down there, because right now it is not under control. So with that, I'll be glad to answer a couple more questions. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to get that printed out? And that whole thing you're showing there should be on pages and printed out and given to people who need to know these things, because the media's not going to do it or can't do it.
Yeah, I'll let you have this one.
Huh?
I'll let y'all have this one.
I didn't understand.
No, I'll let you have it. I'll give it to you, to Julie.
Good.
General.
Yes.
My comment is real quick and simple. Why can't Texas build some walls and make a GoFundMe page for it? Because that would be an easy solution right there. You might have to move it in 10 more miles, but you can get it done.
That's right.
I'll interrupt here as his
Jag. You're directing policy questions to a non-politician. Okay, so that's,
I mean, could it be done is what I'm asking.
once again, there, as has been pointed out, there are procedures in the Texas Constitution and the United States Constitution for some of these things to be done, but General Bodisch doesn't have the authority just to say, I'm going to send people there. Once again, if you recall his flow chart, all our orders come from the governor through the adjutant general down to him. He executes the mission, but these are policy questions that we have to, and as you know, I'm an elected official, so just like I tell people all the time, it's your courthouse, your courtroom, come watch what we're doing. This is why we have to hold our other elected officials accountable and ask these hard questions of them.
Very well said. That's why I'm a lawyer.
We're actually, it's 8 o'clock, so we're out of time. So you're out of the hot seat, but I just want to thank you so much for what you do. Thank y'all, have a good night.